You look at your life from the outside sometimes. Not dramatically, not in a crisis. Just in small moments that arrive quietly. You're sitting in traffic on the way home from work. Or standing in line somewhere on a Sunday afternoon. Or watching someone else talk about burnout online while you realize you've been tired for so long that it no longer even feels unusual. And from the outside, your life looks fine. You have a good job. A stable income. You pay your bills. You're not drowning in debt. You don't buy luxury watches or sports cars or anything obviously reckless. In fact, if someone described your life on paper, it would probably sound successful. And yet, every month still feels strangely tight. Not catastrophic, not desperate, just tense. Like your life is always slightly more expensive than your nervous system expected it to be. Like you're constantly catching up to something invisible. And the strange part is, you can't point to a single bad decision. Nothing looks wrong individually. Which is exactly why so many people never notice what's actually happening. My name is Theo, and I spend a lot of time thinking about the ways people accidentally build lives that become more and more expensive, without ever consciously choosing to do that. If you've ever felt like your income should feel more secure than it actually does, if you've ever wondered why a good life somehow still creates financial pressure in the background of everyday existence, press like and subscribe if this video helps you notice something you hadn't seen before. Because most people think financial stress comes from obvious things. Low income, debt, overspending, bad decisions. But for a growing number of people with stable careers, the pressure arrived differently. It arrived quietly. Nothing changed overnight. The system slowly reset their definition of normal. And they adapted before they noticed it. That's the part nobody really talks about. Most people with good jobs are not trying to look rich. They're trying to feel functional inside environments that keep redefining what functional means. And modern life is extremely good at doing this invisibly. Especially professional life. Because once you enter certain environments, your idea of what counts as basic starts shifting without permission. A slightly nicer apartment starts feeling reasonable because you work hard and need rest. Food delivery starts feeling practical because your schedule is exhausting. Better clothing starts feeling necessary because appearance quietly affects confidence and perception. A cleaner gym, a quieter neighborhood, a more comfortable flight, a better mattress, faster services, less friction. None of these things feel extravagant individually. That's what makes the system so effective. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to build an expensive emotional ecosystem around themselves. It happens gradually. The pressure didn't arrive dramatically. It arrived quietly. And eventually you stopped questioning it because everyone around you normalized it. That's the important part. Normalization. Human beings are incredibly adaptive creatures. We adapt to temperature, to noise, to stress, to privilege, to convenience. But we also adapt to standards. Especially social standards that repeat often enough. If everyone around you orders convenience constantly, inconvenience starts feeling irrational. If everyone around you upgrades their living situation after promotions, staying still starts feeling emotionally strange. If every exhausted coworker talks about deserving certain comforts after hard weeks, eventually your brain absorbs the same equation. Work hard, feel depleted, purchase relief. Not because you're irresponsible, because the emotional logic begins to feel normal. And modern professional culture quietly trains people to associate exhaustion with entitlement. You worked hard, you earned this, you deserve convenience, you deserve comfort, you deserve recovery. Again, none of this sounds dangerous. But systems become powerful when their incentives align silently. And modern life is designed around reducing friction, especially for people with disposable income. Because inconvenience used to be part of ordinary life. Cooking took effort. Errands took time, waiting was normal. Repairing things was common. Planning ahead mattered. Now entire industries exist to eliminate every small discomfort imaginable. And when you're tired enough, convenience stops feeling luxurious. It starts feeling emotionally necessary. That's the trap, not because convenience itself is bad, but because exhausted people consistently overvalue immediate relief. Behavioral finance researchers talk a lot about present bias, the tendency to prioritize immediate emotional comfort over future outcomes. But what's interesting is that modern systems no longer wait for people to seek relief. The system anticipates exhaustion before you even consciously feel it. Everything is optimized around reducing resistance. One click, auto-renewal, instant delivery, subscription ecosystems, priority access, premium versions of ordinary experiences. And after enough exposure, your brain stops viewing these things as upgrades. They become emotional infrastructure. You stop experiencing them as choices. You experience them as baseline stability. That's when life becomes expensive in a way that's hard to explain to yourself. Because technically, you're not overspending. You're maintaining a version of normal that keeps slowly expanding. And the expansion rarely feels dramatic while it's happening. That's why so many people with good jobs constantly feel financially behind despite earning more than they ever imagined earlier in life. Their income increased. But the emotional definition of enough evolved at the exact same speed. Sometimes even faster. And most people never notice the adaptation loop because adaptation feels natural while it's occurring. Think about something simple. The first time someone starts paying for a premium convenience, it feels special, then useful, then normal, then necessary. And eventually the absence of it feels uncomfortable. That's how emotional baselines work. The human nervous system normalizes improvements incredibly quickly, especially improvements connected to comfort, status reduction, or stress relief, which means every small lifestyle upgrade has a hidden psychological side effect. It quietly changes what feels acceptable afterward. A slightly better apartment changes what small feels like. A smoother routine changes your tolerance for inconvenience. A more comfortable lifestyle changes your emotional relationship with effort itself. And because these changes happen gradually, people rarely recognize the cumulative effect. They only notice the background anxiety later. The strange feeling that their life somehow requires constant maintenance now. That's the word. Maintenance. A lot of modern professionals are no longer building freedom. They're maintaining systems, maintaining routines, maintaining appearances, maintaining convenience, maintaining emotional recovery mechanisms, maintaining a life structure that became expensive one invisible adjustment at a time. And the exhausting part is that none of it feels irrational, because individually, every decision made sense. That's what makes this different from simplistic financial advice. This is not about coffee, or budgeting apps, or telling people to stop enjoying life. It's about understanding how environments quietly reshape emotional expectations, especially environments built around productivity, exhaustion, and performance. People underestimate how much professional identity changes consumption behavior. When someone begins earning more, they usually enter different social ecosystems, different coworkers, different neighborhoods, different digital algorithms, different expectations. And these ecosystems constantly communicate subtle messages about what adulthood should look like. Not explicitly, quietly, professionals should optimize time. Professionals should look composed. Professionals should travel occasionally. Professionals should recover properly. Professionals should upgrade certain experiences. Professionals should avoid inconvenience because inconvenience signals inefficiency. And eventually, life starts feeling like an endless series of small optimizations. Faster, smoother, cleaner, more efficient, more premium. Until one day you realize your nervous system became extremely expensive to maintain. Not materially. Emotionally, there's a man I kept thinking about while writing this video. His name is Caleb. Caleb did everything correctly. Good student, reliable employee, steady promotions. No reckless behavior. At 24, he lived in a small apartment with mismatched furniture and felt optimistic all the time. At 34, his life looked objectively better in every measurable way. Better salary, better apartment, better routines, better restaurants, better vacations, better technology, better furniture. And yet somehow his sense of freedom barely changed. That's what disturbed him. Because every raise improved his quality of life slightly. But every improvement quietly became permanent. The larger apartment reduced stress. So going backward now felt impossible. The more convenient routines saved time. So inconvenience started feeling emotionally exhausting. The nicer vacations became recovery, not luxury. The upgraded lifestyle slowly transformed from reward into requirement. And Caleb never consciously chose this transformation. He adapted before he noticed it. That's the important detail. Nobody sat him down and said, "Your future emotional baseline will become increasingly expensive." It just happened. Slowly. The system reset his definition of normal. And because everyone around him was experiencing similar shifts, nothing felt unusual. That's how social environments work. People rarely compare themselves to billionaires. They compare themselves horizontally to coworkers, friends, peers, people with similar education, people in similar cities, people in similar careers. And when entire professional classes simultaneously normalize more expensive standards, the pressure becomes ambient. Not dramatic, ambient, which is much more powerful psychologically because ambient pressure doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like reality. And eventually, many people stop asking, do I even want this version of life? They only ask, how do I sustain it? That question changes everything. Because sustainability is where the hidden cost appears. The real cost was never just money, it was flexibility, the ability to step away, the ability to slow down, the ability to tolerate uncertainty, the ability to say no to environments that damage your mental health. When your emotional baseline becomes expensive, your dependence on continuous income quietly increases. That's why so many high earners still feel trapped. Not because they're failing financially. Because their lifestyle now requires emotional and financial continuity at all times. And continuous pressure changes people. It changes how they think about risk, about time, about work, about rest. Some people stop pursuing creative opportunities because stability becomes too psychologically necessary. Some stay in careers they dislike because their nervous system no longer tolerates financial ambiguity. Some become deeply anxious despite objectively successful lives because their internal definition of safe keeps moving further away. That's one of the strangest features of adaptation. The target keeps relocating. Nothing feels sufficient for very long. And modern digital culture accelerates this constantly. Because algorithms don't merely advertise products anymore. They normalize emotional expectations. You scroll through enough beautifully optimized lives, and eventually your own ordinary experiences begin feeling incomplete. Not because you consciously envy people. Because repeated exposure changes your perception of baseline reality. The apartment that once felt peaceful now feels temporary. The vacation that once felt meaningful now feels modest. The routines that once felt comfortable now feel outdated. And once perception changes, emotional pressure follows automatically. Again, quietly. That's the recurring theme here. Quiet pressure. Modern financial exhaustion is often subtle before it becomes severe. It doesn't always look like collapse. Sometimes it looks like permanent low-grade tension. The feeling that you can never fully exhale. The feeling that life is functioning, but only as long as nothing goes wrong. And for many professionals, this creates a strange emotional contradiction. Their life improved externally, but internally, their margin for error shrank. That's why some people earning six figures still feel afraid. Because wealth is not just about income. It's about distance between your obligations and your nervous system. Real wealth creates breathing room. And breathing room is psychological before it's mathematical. The truly wealthy person is not necessarily the one with the most luxurious life. It's often the person whose emotional needs remained relatively stable while their income increased. That's a completely different model of wealth. A quieter one, less visible, but far more powerful. Because the most financially dangerous thing in modern life may not be overspending. It may be unconscious adaptation. The slow expansion of emotional requirements disguised as normal adulthood. And once you see this process clearly, something interesting happens. You stop evaluating purchases individually. You start evaluating the future identity they create. That's a different question entirely. Most people ask, can I afford this? But that question is incomplete. A more important question might be, what kind of future does this lifestyle require me to maintain forever? Because every recurring upgrade creates a recurring dependency. Every elevated baseline creates new psychological expectations. Every convenience reshapes your tolerance for effort. And every emotional standard eventually becomes part of your definition of stability. That doesn't mean you should reject comfort, or ambition, or success, or beautiful experiences. That's not the point. The point is awareness. Awareness of how quietly your environment influences your sense of enough. Awareness of how easily exhaustion becomes monetized. Awareness of how quickly temporary upgrades become permanent emotional needs. Most people never pause long enough to notice the process happening. They just keep adapting, keep optimizing, keep upgrading, keep maintaining, until their entire life feels like something that constantly needs to be financed at full speed. And maybe the goal isn't to escape modern life completely. Maybe the goal is simply to notice which parts of your lifestyle genuinely improve your life, and which parts merely help you keep pace with invisible expectations you stopped questioning years ago. Because the moment you begin seeing the forces that quietly define your version of normal, you begin recovering a little control over them, and that changes something important. Not overnight, quietly. Thank you so much for watching this video, and don't forget to subscribe to see the latest videos. I wish you success.